Good evening and welcome to the Vegas PBS debate in the race for Lieutenant Governor. I'm Elizabeth Thompson.
And I'm Steve Sebelius. Tonight's debate is being held in front of a studio audience. Elizabeth and I will pose questions to the candidates and hear their opening and closing statements.
The order of those statements, in addition to the first question, has been determined by a coin toss. And here are the candidates.
They are Democratic candidate Assemblywoman Lucy Flores and Republican candidate State Senator Mark Hutchison. Mark Hutchison, you have the first opening statement.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you for watching at home. I want to thank both Elizabeth and Steve for hosting us here, and Assemblywoman Flores again for meeting with me when we have another debate. I just want to just give a little background and just talk about what it is that I'm running, what I hope to bring to the office of Lieutenant Governor. I'm a third generation Nevadan. My grandfather was number 12 out of 12 children, living in Kentucky on a farm during the Depression. He was sent out west to build roads and bridges at Zion National Park. Eventually found my grandma in St. George, Utah, and moved her to Las Vegas, and he went to work for the test site for the rest of his life. My dad became John Ahern's very first employee, a company here in town and throughout Nevada known as Ahern Rentals. He worked there for 45 years. I went to work as a young man, as an 11-year-old boy, throwing papers for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. And when I became 12, I went to work with my dad at Ahern Rentals. And I continued to work there from the time I was in middle school, through high school, through college until I went to law school. So I know what it's like to put on a pair of boots, to carry a lunch pail. I also know what it's like to get an education in Nevada. I was publicly educated here, graduated from Bonanza High School, UNLV, understand the importance of education. I came back to Las Vegas after going to law school, built a successful professional practice, raised a family, have 6 children who all are the product of public education, and I've lived the American dream in Nevada. The reason I'm running for Lieutenant Governor is I want to help as many people as possible.
And that's time for that opening statement. Sorry to interrupt. Ms. Flores, your opening statement.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. The reason why I decided to run for Lieutenant Governor is not for some political reason. It's because I understand the challenges that everyday Nevadans are experiencing, and I experienced my own fair share of challenge growing up in the district that I represent. I have been there since I was 2 years old. We grew up pretty low income, but it wasn't until my mom left my family that I started to experience challenge. I was doing very well in school, but when I started doing very poorly, there wasn't anyone there to help me and to guide me, and so I very quickly fell in with the wrong crowd. I ended up on juvenile parole by the time I was 15, and I was a high school dropout at 17. It wasn't until I got that intervention, until I got someone who invested in me, that I was able to do something differently with myself. It's why I'm an attorney now, why I'm standing here as the Lieutenant Governor candidate. And that's the reason why I decided to run, because I believe that everyone in Nevada, regardless of where they come from, regardless of where they're growing up, deserves access to the same high quality education that I was able to get. That families should have access to good paying jobs and job training and retraining opportunities. And I believe that Nevada needs a leader who will stand up to the status quo, who will fight against the special interests, and who will fight tooth and nail for everyday Nevadans. It's what I've done as a legislator, as a community leader, and it's what I'll do as your Lieutenant Governor. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to our questions. First question for Mr. Hutchison. You and your opponent have both outlined rather expansive agendas for your term if you're elected to this job. But you and your opponent are also both law school graduates. I know you've read the Constitution that specifies the very limited powers of the Lieutenant Governor's job. It's really the only constitutional office that's part-time. Given that you'd both have more ability to influence legislation and policy in your current jobs, the first question, why do you want this job?
Well, I want to live, have as many Nevadans live the American dream as I have. And I think the way that you do that is through good jobs, good economic opportunities, Steve, through educational opportunities and good quality education. And I think that as a Lieutenant Governor, you're in that position to be able to make those kind of changes in Nevada and to help improve Nevada. Some people have said that Lieutenant Governor's position isn't that strong, or why would you want to give up your role in the state Senate? You're a leader. You are electing the #2 leader in Nevada for the executive department. And I think as an executive branch member, You can lead the way, set the agenda for providing opportunities for families. We want to have increased opportunities within education. We want to have good jobs and good employment opportunities. And as Lieutenant Governor, you sit on the Board of Economic Developments. You are the chairman of the Commission on Tourism. You are the president of the State Senate. And you have an opportunity to influence policy at that level. And so I see it as a great opportunity. I've got great relationships with all the members of the State Senate. I plan to be a very active Lieutenant Governor. I've got the experience having formed my own law firm and my own small business to understand what it is needed to bring small businesses to Nevada, to see them flourish and to thrive. And finally, I was publicly educated here. As are all 6 of my children, I understand the importance of public education. I do believe, as a leader, you can influence all those issues.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Flores, same question. Why seek this job when you probably have more influence in your current job?
Well, thank you for the question. It is an important question. The reason why I'm running for Lieutenant Governor is because I do believe that there is an incredible opportunity for someone who has some energy and some desire to really bring a different perspective, to bring the voice of the everyday Nevadan to the top leadership positions in Nevada. And quite frankly, this is an independent office that requires independent thought. And I don't plan on being a rubber stamp like my opponent will likely do, given his support of just about everything that comes out of the governor's office. At the end of the day, there's some really great ideas that come out of the office, but it's our job to to hold people accountable, to ask questions, and to provide that perspective of the everyday Nevadan. And that's what I have done as a policymaker in the legislature. The Lieutenant Governor continues to be a policymaker. They get to introduce legislation, and I'm a very good policymaker. More than 75% of the legislation that I have introduced has actually been signed under a Republican governor, so we have a very good working relationship. But at the end of the day, this office requires more than a rubber stamp. It requires someone who is going to fight tooth and nail for everyday Nevadans, and to be sure that that perspective is there, that perspective is being fought for every single day, and that's what I intend to do.
Mr. Hutchison, your rebuttal.
Well, I have a lot of confidence in Brian Sandoval. I'm grateful to have his endorsement. I'm grateful to be somebody who he has confidence in as well and wants to be his partner. I think one of the things that gives you an opportunity to do some of the stuff that you're talking about, Steve, and to make the office important, make the office consequential, is the trust and the confidence of the governor. And I've got the trust and confidence of the governor, and I'm proud to have it. I want to apologize for a second about that. I've got the same vision in many ways that Brian Sandoval has. He has been a leader in education. He's been a leader in job growth. We saw his leadership displayed in the Tesla deal that was just concluded. And so I'm proud to be a partner with him. I think that's a very stark difference between me and my opponent. Brian Sandoval and I will be a great team together. I'll never apologize for working closely with the governor.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next question is for Ms. Flores. Your opponent and the Republican State Leadership Committee has a TV ad up that criticizes you for failing to report all of your campaign expenses, and that ad includes your reply saying it was unfair to have to report everything. In retrospect, even if you had a legal justification for not reporting some of those expenses, don't you think now you probably should have done so just for the sake of transparency?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I did. Once that came to light that there was a different interpretation of the requirements, I amended that report. I actually provided more information that was asked for, and ultimately this attack ad is nothing more than my opponent's going back to his status quo of trying to distract voters from the issues that matter. This is exactly the kind of sleazy stuff that occurred during the primary, and ultimately, polluting our airwaves with information that distracts from the issues that we should be talking about is really what we should be doing. And ultimately, my opponent also knows that those expenses, the legislators, it's common and it's legal. And as a matter of fact, he actually spent $1,500 of his own campaign funds on travel and on office expenses just this last legislative session. So the hypocrisy is also quite present, but ultimately it's just a distraction. We should be talking about the issues that matter to the people of Nevada, and quite frankly, despite spending more than $2 million, we're still in this, and polling says that he has not pulled ahead. And so what that means is that the people of Nevada are interested in the things that we're talking about, the issues that matter.
Mr. Hutchison.
Well, I'll take my opponent at her word and say that she wishes that she would have been more transparent and that she would have reported it. That's what was required to happen. The Secretary of State found her to be in violation of state law. Find her for that. And I'll take her at her word for saying that she wants to be more transparent. I think that's a good thing. It's not a matter of spending the money. It's a matter of reporting it. So you can spend the money on various matters, including some of the things that she spent money on. You can certainly spend it on travel. You can certainly spend it on campaign expenses. But the point of the violation that the Secretary of State found was that there was an effort to hide that and not to properly report it. So I'll take her at her word. And if she said that she wishes that she would have been more transparent, I applaud her for that. And I think that's the right approach.
Ms. Flores, anything to add?
Absolutely. What I think is still incredibly hypocritical is that my opponent actually violated the law himself. There was already an understanding that we were supposed to report gifts, and yet he failed to report a $15,000 all expense paid trip on his gift disclosure and did not report that until it came to light earlier this year. So if we're going to talk about a kettle trying to call the pot black, I think it's incredibly hypocritical, and again, we should be talking about the issues that matter to the people of Nevada, not taking up time with these types of dirty negative attack ads.
Okay, next question for Mr. Hutchison. On this same topic, but in a broader sense, in light of these and other issues with campaign reporting that have come up in recent campaigns and election cycles in Nevada, would you support a law that requires full disclosure of all campaign expenses and lobbyist spending, regardless of when it occurs with respect to the legislative session?
The answer is yes. I'd support full transparency. You know, I was on the Ethics Commission for 6 years. I chaired that commission. Everything that we did during the course of that commission was open, subject to the open meeting laws. Even when it wasn't subject to the open meeting laws, we held those hearings and made them widely available. I think the more transparency, the better. I'd be happy to support those laws, and I'd be happy to continue to work with the Secretary of State, work with the legislature to make sure that happens. I've been a proponent of transparency and want to continue to see that. My opponent brings up this $15,000 issue, which I reported immediately when that became an issue. She took the same trip. She didn't tell you that. But she took the same trip to Israel. This is American-Israeli Political Action Committee that sends you to Israel, gives legislators an opportunity to see the geopolitical issues that are going on in Israel, as well as the business and professional matters that are happening there that can be applied to Nevada. She took the same trip. Matter of fact, my first last session, she got up and gave a speech about that. You know what? I gave a speech about that. We're very transparent in terms of taking that trip. We think it was a good thing. We both took it. And yet there's some effort here to suggest that there was wrongdoing. I disclosed that immediately once that became an issue, but I wasn't ever fined by the Secretary of State. I was never ever found in violation of state law, unlike my opponent.
That's your time. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next question for Ms. Flores. You've been criticized by the Review Journal for, in the 2013 session, blocking a bill that would have provided additional funding for the program Teach for America. Tell us, why did you oppose that program?
Well, it's a great question, and unfortunately that topic came up literally on the very last day of session, and it died not because there was a no vote on it. It did not get through the legislative process in time before we ended our legislative session. My no vote on it out of the Budget Committee was because as a legislator, it's my job, again, to provide accountability, to ask questions, to make sure that taxpayers are getting the best return on their tax dollar. And in an environment where we have literally cut education $1 billion, my opponent talks about the governor being the education leader. Well, you can't do a whole lot to improve education when you're cutting it by $1 billion. And the environment where you're talking about $2 million to go to one program that we did not have enough information on, that had no statistics in terms of return on investment, I, in good faith, could not vote to support something like that. Instead, I wanted those $2 million to go into teacher development, to go into the classroom directly. We were not able to fund a bill because the governor proposed a corporate tax cut that wiped out a fund that would have funded a fund that would have reimbursed teachers for the expenses they have out of pocket. I would have preferred to use those $2 million in that place. So that's why I voted no, because ultimately I could not prove that the return on investment was there in a situation where we had cut $1 billion from education just 2 years prior.
Thank you.
This Teach for America is a good program, Elizabeth and Steve. It's a really good program. This Teach for America would have sent $2 million to the most at-risk schools, including in my opponent's district, paid for 100 highly motivated, highly educated teachers to come in and help with the teacher shortage. It passed out of the Senate with her Democrat colleagues and with my Republican colleagues 20-1. Passed out of the Senate 20-1. She led the effort to kill it in the committee. It's consistent, though, with what she's done in the past. She wants to be viewed as somebody who is pro-education, but she won't touch things other than, if it's something that would affect a particular constituency or special interest group that I think has a pretty strong hold on her. She shot down the parental trigger laws. We passed that 21-0 in the Senate. Wide bipartisan support, just like Teach for America. She voted against that, shot that down. And that would provide, again, opportunities for the most needy students and their parents to take a failing school, turn it into an empowerment school, and then if necessary, turn it into a charter school to provide these parents with an opportunity in the lowest performing schools to have a charter school and a chance for a good education. She voted that down. But we passed it 21-0. And my good friend and her colleague, Aaron Ford, is the one who sponsored that. So we see a pattern here, and I don't think it's a good one.
Ms. Flores, your rebuttal.
At the end of the day, I support foundational improvement to education. I'm not going to support little band-aids here and there. What we need to do is we need to fully fund adequately education in Nevada. We have not done it. We have not made it a priority. And those are the things that I fought tooth and nail for that my opponent did not. He released an ad that said that he was an education champion, and yet journalists debunked that and said there was scant evidence of that. At the end of the day, I know what education means to Nevada, to our communities, to our families, and ultimately we have to fix the foundational issue of our unfunded education, our inadequately funded educational system, and make sure that we replace fully the $1 billion that was cut from education, and that we don't just try to do little sound bites, little feel-good things like some of the programs that my opponent mentioned. I would love to support those programs, but not when it means that we're taking crucial dollars from places like teachers, from going directly into our classrooms and making sure that our teachers have, and our administrators and our students have all of the resources that they need.
Thank you very much. Our next question for Mr. Hutchison. You stood with some of your Republican colleagues and Minority Leader Roberson during the 2013 session to advocate a $600 million tax specifically on the mining industry. But more recently you said that you wouldn't support that tax any longer unless the industry agreed to pay it. Now, at the time you were in the legislature, you were representing an urban district that has no mining. Now you're running statewide, right. And the mining industry, of course, is part of the constituency for this new job. Do you consider that a flip-flop?
Well, what I did, Steve, was I left the session and toured Nevada. And I think I've had 600 campaign events. I've been doing this almost 16 months now. I've had 5 or 6 different tours specifically of mines. I've gone into Elko, Winnemucca, those communities. I've learned a lot about mining. Mining is one of the most important industries in our state. We've got to make sure that we keep mining strong. And mining is supporting me in this election, not supporting my opponent, because mining knows that when we proposed that tax reform measure, it was largely as a response to the margins tax. My opponent opposes that. I oppose it. We at least presented an alternative to say, look, let's at least get the discussion moving here. We got nothing from our friends in the legislature who we thought would at least start a discussion. And as a result, it dropped. Never a vote taken on it. But I believe that mining is a strong industry and it needs to remain strong. It's vital to rural Nevada. And my philosophy on taxation, and particularly on businesses, is look, let's make sure that we don't crush them. Let's make sure that we don't hurt them. And mining has been very good about prepaying their taxes, finding ways to help pay the freight here in Nevada, and I want to make sure that that they remain strong. And so my promise to them is that, look, you're going to have a seat at the table with me. And if that's discussed, then we'll have a conversation about that, and we'll make sure we do it the right way.
Ms. Flores, you're also opposed to that specific tax?
Ultimately, I do not, I didn't support it then. I do not support single industry taxation. It's just bad tax policy. So even if it was not the mining industry, for example, a single industry taxation is just a bad approach. So I do not agree with my opponent in trying to tax one single industry, whether he's changed his mind on it or not. Either way, that's a bad approach to tax policy. But you know, I just find it so curious because it was just recently that my opponent was still saying that he was the only person, or his party was the only person who actually had a real solution to funding education. But then he goes and talks to the mining community and he says that it was just his way of trying to defeat the education initiative. So if he's recently discovered mining again, I suppose that's okay. But at the end of the day, no, I do not support single industry taxation. What we need here in Nevada is reform to our entire tax structure that's broad-based, that's fair, that's equitable, and that's sustainable long-term, so that we're not dependent on the ebb and flow of the economy, because our tax structure is right now just getting revenue from tourism and gaming, et cetera. It needs to be reformed. It hasn't been done so in 30, 40 years.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchison, your rebuttal.
Well, I think that we just need to make sure that we're smart in our approach to tax policy in this state. My opponent, suggests that somehow she doesn't have any criticism of the mining industry or didn't really like what was going on there. She's said recently that she thinks that the mining industry gets a free pass in this state. She voted to remove very important deductions to the mining industry from their ability to deduct certain business expenses. And so let's at least be consistent. Let's at least try to understand that we're trying to ferret out and understand a tax policy that makes sense, and we're going to spend a lot of time next session doing that.
Thanks.
All right, our next question is for Ms. Flores. Both you and your opponent, in the grand scheme, have had relatively little state government experience. Mr. Hutchison served as a state senator for 2 years, and you served in the assembly for 2 terms, which is the equivalent of 4 years. But the lieutenant governor could be called upon to serve as governor, either in the event that the governor temporarily can't serve or even permanently. What in your background has prepared you to serve as governor of this state?
Sure, thank you for the question. You know, I'm actually very, very proud of my background and my record of accomplishment in the legislature. You know, all my life I've been a fighter. All my life I've had to figure out how to make things work and then have to be successful regardless of, what's thrown my way. And so that's exactly what kind of perspective and the kind of person I am and the values that I bring to every job that I do, whether it's legislative or not. And as a legislator, that allowed me to work with my colleagues across the aisle, to work with the governor, to have more than 75% of my legislation signed into law, and really expansive legislation that I'm very proud of: domestic violence prevention, consumer protection, education reform. I'm very proud of my record, and as a demonstrated leader, both legislatively and in my community, I'm absolutely qualified and ready to be the governor should that need arise. But that being said, I am just ready to fight for everyday Nevadans. That's what I came here to do. That's why I left my seat and decided to run for this office. And that's my complete and total motivation for being in public service. And luckily, I'm pretty good at what I do.
Mr. Hutchison, same question.
Well, it's a fair question because for any reason you could be called to serve as the governor if the governor can't serve. I've had a lot of experience that I think I would bring not only to this office, lieutenant governor, but any other office. But I start with an approach to government, which is we've got to find bipartisan solutions to solve problems in Nevada. I was very, very proud of what we did with Tesla and how the governor brought together the legislature, and as legislature we came together. That's a nice model for what we need to do at the highest levels of government. And I think I've I think I've earned a reputation for doing that. I've reached across the aisle. I've had bipartisan support, and I've provided bipartisan support. I've got friends on both sides of the aisle in the state Senate. I think that's an important quality to bring to the office. I served, as I said, on the Nevada Commission on Ethics for 6 years, having chaired that commission. I understand how those agencies and those commissions work and function. And then I've started and produced a successful business. I know how to run a company. I know what it's like to be dealing with tax policy, tax issues, regulation, understand what businesses need in order to thrive and to grow. I was publicly educated in Nevada. My children are publicly educated. I'm a big proponent of a very strong public education. So I think all that experience is what I bring to not only this office, but any other office.
Ms. Flores, anything to add?
Sure. Well, you know, I actually find my opponent's comments very interesting, given that his demonstrated record of accomplishment in the legislature is only about 20% of the legislation that he introduced actually got passed and signed into law by his very good friend, the Republican governor. And so ultimately, I think what people need to look at is records, what people have actually accomplished, where their priorities are. And that's what I've demonstrated my entire life and in my legislative record. And actually, I'm pretty happy of one of my opponent's failures, and that was his failure to defeat the Affordable Care Act. So that's helped a whole lot of Nevadans.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Mr. Hutchison. One of your campaign ads claims that you fought for more education funding as well as for higher education standards in the most recent legislative session. In what way specifically did you personally fight for those issues?
Well, let's start with higher standards. I introduced and sponsored my own bill, and in fact, it passed both houses of the state legislature. By the way, when you're in the minority, you don't get to control every single committee, every single floor session, every single vote like Ms. Flores' party does. And when you do that, you can pass a lot of legislation. When you're in the minority, you can't pass quite as much. But nevertheless, I was in the minority, passed legislation that called for budget prioritization within Clark County School District and other school districts throughout Nevada that would require that they prioritize budget based on performance in the classroom and specifically required their budgeting to look at classroom performance and classroom resources. That's one way. Another way was through the ELL funding. We historically provided in the last legislative session $50 million for ELL funding, where we can provide greater opportunities to those who don't speak English as their first language. Those are higher standards. They're allowed now to see those students flourish. And then I fought for education funding with Governor Sandoval, stood side by side with him. We increased education funding by $50 million, and I was very proud of that. Now, my opponent says that that's not real funding increases, but you know, she controlled, and her party controlled, both houses of the legislature. I never saw anything from her. I never saw a bill proposed by her. She's so effective. Why criticize the governor and his budget, which, by the way, she voted for, which provided the $500 million, and yet not offer an alternative or offer a solution rather than just criticize?
Ms. Flores, your response.
Well, my opponent knows very well that it requires a 2/3 vote to pass any kind of legislation that's related to funding. And so without having the support of my Republican colleagues, it doesn't matter who controls the legislature. If you don't have support of the other party, then nothing's going to happen. And the governor did add replacement funding, and we're really glad for that. But at the end of the day, we did not have support from our Republican colleagues to support a revenue package that we did introduce that was broad-based, that was not single industry the way that my opponent supported, that would have found the funding that we need to properly fund education in Nevada. But without the support of our Republican colleagues, it's never going to get done. And so I hope that my opponent, he's guaranteed to go back to the Senate because he's midterm. And so regardless of outcome of this election, he's headed back to the Senate. He'll still be an elected official, and I hope that he'll stay true to his word and work with Democrats to get real funding and real solutions to our revenue problems here in Nevada to finally fund education adequately.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Hutchison.
Well, I think my opponent just underscores my point, which is she and her party controlled both houses of the legislature, every single committee, decided when a vote was being taken, when a matter was heard, when it wasn't heard, and we never considered what she just said that was presented to the Republicans. Never. We never considered that. What we considered was the governor's budget. She voted for it, I voted for it. She didn't propose an alternative. She wants to criticize the governor, wants to criticize Republicans, but offer no alternative. And I don't think that's a way to lead. I think that's just being a critic.
All right.
All right, our next question from Ms. Flores. You mentioned a couple of seconds ago you don't support single industry taxation, and you've also come out, as your opponent has, against question 3, the education initiative. So this is your opportunity to outline a tax strategy that you would support. What specifically now would you recommend as a tax policy to fully fund not only education but other state needs?
Sure. Well, you know, first of all, I have to clear something up. There was an alternative proposed during this last legislative session. It included a services tax. It included a number of other alternatives that was broad-based. It was different from the plan that I currently support. But there was an alternative. My opponent was there last session. Perhaps he just doesn't remember the hours and hours and hours of discussion on this. But what I do support is something that is broad-based, that's sustainable. There was a plan that was introduced in 2011. It would have taken away completely the payroll tax and would have replaced it with a comprehensive solution that was broad-based, that was a much lower tax rate. It was at 0.08%. It would have been on a net profit, and it also would have included a component of services tax. That is what I supported. That was what industry leaders supported. It was what education advocates supported, parents supported. For the first time in many years, we had a coalition of people who were ready to support this in 2011, and unfortunately, that was the year that a number of Republicans were elected, and they were just completely not open to having a conversation about it, and so it did not pass.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchison, same question. Specifically, what do you think ought to be in a tax plan that would adequately fund education and other needs in the state?
Well, I think that the first thing we got to do is get to December and see what the Economic Forum says. Because as you know, the Economic Forum is going to tell us how much revenue we're going to have, what's available for funding. The first and best way to fund government is through growth and economic opportunities for there to be increases in sales revenues, for there to be increases in gaming revenues, for there to be increases in property values, all which add to the revenues that are available to government. So the best way to fund government at the state level is through growth and a robust economy. That's why it's so important that we focus on economic development. So I want to take a look at those numbers and see where we're at. Then what I want to do is I want to have a big discussion, as I said before, with business, with industry, with all the interests that are going to be at the legislature, and we're going to say, look, what is it? How are we going to fix this this tax issue in the state of Nevada? The governor I saw recently has said that he plans to lead out on that, and I think with his leadership, that we'll get some very constructive tax reforms done. But everybody who looks at this has evaluated it and knows what to do. You got to broaden the base for the most part, and you lower the rates. And what those base looks like and what those rates look like is what discussion needs to be about in the legislature. We didn't have a whole lot of that last time. And again, I just say to my opponent, she and her party controlled every committee, controlled every floor session. Show me a bill that they gave the Republicans to vote on that was different than Governor Sandoval's budget. We had the budget to vote on. She voted for it. I voted on it. She criticizes it, but we didn't have anything brought to the floor for a vote that she proposed as an alternative. That's not leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchison. Ms. Flores, your rebuttal.
Perhaps I served on the Ways and Means Committee, so perhaps my opponent just doesn't understand the budgeting process. But the budget that's proposed is different from then the revenue package, where you offer changes to the taxes and various laws that will bring in revenue into the state. That's a separate bill. So maybe my opponent just isn't familiar with the way that the legislature works. But that's how it works, and it was proposed, and we did discuss it at length. And again, I did not hear any specific solutions, once again, about what my opponent would do to actually solve our revenue problem in Nevada. We need leaders who are going to give specific issues, who are willing to be courageous and say, X, Y, and Z, this is what we should do, and these are my ideas. And hopefully the majority of Nevadans agree with that and will vote for me. That's what I've been doing this entire time. And no, we are not going to grow our way out of our problems. We haven't done it ever. We have still inadequately funded education all these years, and that is not a method that works. We've tried it, it doesn't work. Thank
you very much. Next question to Mr. Hutchison. The lieutenant governor's job, when the legislature is not in session, you're not presiding over the state senate. is primarily concerned with tourism. Give me 2 ideas that you have to bring more tourists to Nevada.
Well, one of the things I was just at a little conference today with the Nevada Business Aviation Association. We were talking about this very issue, international tourism. What we need to do is to provide opportunities for airlines to bring in more international tourists. And we need to work very closely with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitor Authority, with the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitor Authority, and with the airlines to bring more international tourism in. So that's what I would be focused on. I'd be focused on bringing more of those international tourists. And by the way, some of our best customers are right here in the Northern Hemisphere. They come in from Canada, they come in from Mexico, and so I'd focus even more efforts and more coordinated efforts with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitor Authority, with the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitor Authority, to bring in more of that international tourism. Then once we have them here, Steve, then I think we need to help them extend their stay and to see everything that this state offers all the way throughout rural Nevada, on both sides of the state. So let's bring in more international tourism. If we can take our international tourism from 15 or 16% more up to like 19, 20%, be a huge difference in jobs and a huge opportunity for us as Nevadans.
Okay. Ms. Flores, same question. A couple ideas that you would have to bring tourists here.
Well, I'm glad to hear first and foremost that my opponent is focusing on Canada and Mexico. It's incredibly important. Actually, not too long ago, he said he would actually move resources from the Lieutenant Governor's office to open another office in India, which I thought was not an approach that I would do, given that we need to focus on our partners in our continent that provide incredible opportunities to partnership with for jobs, for tourism, of course, for student exchanges, et cetera. There's so many opportunities. So I'm glad to see that he's changed his mind on that as well. That being said, you know, the Lieutenant Governor is the #1 advocate for your state. I absolutely think it's a critical component of the job. I would also focus on Mexico and Canada, also our regional partners, Hawaii, for example, all of these tourist meccas. You know, we're considered the 9th island here in Las Vegas, and so being able to capitalize on those kinds of partnerships are important. In addition, it's also incredibly important to make sure that people from Nevada are the ones that are promoting Nevada. Unfortunately, the Tourism Commission awarded a multi-million-dollar contract to an out-of-state company to promote Nevada, and I want to start an effort to make sure we keep Nevada tax dollars with Nevada businesses.
Thank you. Mr. Hutchison, your rebuttal.
Well, I'm not eliminating anything. I'll take an all-of-the-above approach. Anybody who wants to come, you know, from anywhere in the world, let's get them here. We're the greatest entertainment capital of the world. Let's bring them in. You know, Lorraine Hunt pioneered, you know, the office in China. Let's pioneer some other offices. We can do all of the above. We can work closely with the Convention and Visitor Authorities. We can bring more international tourism in within our hemisphere, but we can also establish a beachhead in India and other parts of the world where we see the middle class growing. They want a desire to come here. Let's get our people out there. Let's coordinate those activities and those opportunities to bring them to Las Vegas and to Reno and throughout Nevada.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next question for Ms. Flores. During the course of your campaign, you said your opponent represents the status quo. However, you yourself recently attended a fairly high-dollar fundraiser hosted by Senator Harry Reid at Charlie Palmer Steakhouse in Washington, D.C. And in addition, it's well known that you have assembled a very reputable campaign team of nationally known Democrats, including Harry Reid's former campaign manager and a pretty a boutique consulting firm pollster, I would say. So how is it, Ms. Flores, that your campaign is not part of the status quo itself, but just on your side of the political aisle?
Well, when I refer to status quo, I'm talking about the special interests. It's not me who's received over $2.5 million from special interests in Nevada. So when you ask yourself who is going to be indebted to those special interests, it's not me. So ultimately, when I talk about status quo, I talk about defending the current situation, whether it's not actively working on making education the #1 priority in Nevada, making more job opportunities available to Nevadans, training opportunities, retraining opportunities. It's those kinds of things that I'm talking about. At the end of the day, I'm very proud of my team and the fact that I've managed to attract some very talented people to work with me who believe in what I'm trying to do. So that being said, said, status quo for me is about fighting for the everyday Nevadan to not being connected or indebted into those special interests, and being in that lieutenant governor's office and not being a rubber stamp and being that
That's your
independent
time.
voice.
Mr. Hutchison?
Well, I'm interested to hear my opponent describe the dozens and dozens of individuals who support me as some special interest. I've got a lot of people who have supported me. Take a look at my campaign contribution forms that just came out. Take a look at my opponents, and you can see who the special interests are, and decide for yourself what she has on her report. I've got dozens and dozens of individuals. I got my daughter who gave me $10. I got my son who gave me $25. You know, I mean, if they're special interest, okay. But I've got people all throughout Nevada who have contributed and supported my campaign. And I think that people who contribute your campaign reflects support for your campaign, support for your message. But I think what my opponent really represents is the status quo, particularly in education. She wants to talk about funding for education, and we agree on that. We need to have more funding in education. But what she won't talk about is, and what she didn't support was, things like the governor's Education Opportunity Scholarship that would have provided an opportunity scholarship of $10,000 to the most needy students. It's not a voucher. Private parties contribute to that and get a tax credit. She wouldn't support Teach for America. She wouldn't support the other education issues that we talked about.
That's your time. Ms. Flores, last word on this question.
Just because I think my opponent believes that it says something that it becomes true. As I said, no, I don't support Band-Aid approaches. We need to adequately fund education, and we need to find real solutions to that. That's what I fight for. And as far as status quo in education, it's me who actually got rid of the high school proficiency exam and completely revamped the way that we exit our kids out, because that was status quo and it wasn't working. So I did something about it. I changed that to an end of course model, a lower stakes model that actually works for our kids now. So I have a record that demonstrates that I'm not status quo.
All right, thank you. And that's all the time we have for our questions. Now the candidates with their closing statements. And Mark Hutchison, you are first.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity that I've had to be here. Thank you again to Assemblywoman Flores, to everybody for showing up and give us an opportunity to talk about our vision for Nevada. I really want to go back to that point about status quo. Education is an important topic. It's going to be important in this upcoming legislative session. You need somebody who will not only look at funding increases, but real reform. My opponent will not look at real reform. She won't support the governor's efforts for a scholarship fund that provides the most at-risk students an opportunity for school choice, empowering parents and students. She won't support a parental trigger law, which has been widely popular throughout the country and very, very effective, where parents can be empowered again to change failing schools into successful schools. She won't support 100 teachers, highly motivated, to go teach our students at the most at-risk schools. What she wants to do is just avoid those. And she says they're Band-Aids. They're not Band-Aids, they're solutions to part of a bigger reformation effort in education. She represents the status quo, though. I'm going to represent an effort to move Nevada forward, having been publicly educated myself, my children publicly educated, having built a small business here, having lived here and understand what it means for businesses to be able to thrive and to develop, so we have economic opportunities, job growth, so that families have this great upward mobility with education, job growth, and economic opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Ms. Flores.
Well, the differences couldn't be any more stark. I support a scholarship fund for at-risk children. It's called adequately funding education. You can't pick and choose those who should get a scholarship and who shouldn't. We need to ensure that every single student in Nevada has access to high quality education. That is what I benefited from. It's what I think that every single Nevadan should benefit from. And ultimately, the differences are not any more clear, whether it's on health care, whether it's on marriage equality, whether it's on background checks for guns that my opponent voted against marriage equality, tried to defeat the Health Care Act that has sort of helped so many Nevadans, education. All of these things are issues that we are very different on. And at the end of the day, I hope to continue earning the support of every single Nevadan. And I hope that when they go to that ballot box, they will vote for the person who most represents their perspective and who they believe will fight tooth and nail every single day for everyday Nevadans.
Thank you. That concludes our debate for Lieutenant Governor. We'd like to thank Democratic Assemblywoman Lucy Flores and Republican State Senator Mark Hutchison for participating. We'd like to thank you for watching as well. Tune in next week for our debate between the two candidates vying to become the next Clark County Sheriff, Larry Burns, and Joe Lombardo. That's at 7:30 right here on Vegas PBS Channel 10. We'll see you then.